Hi, today I'm going to be discussing and ranking all of the 32 Beethoven piano sonatas on this tier list based on my subjective opinion. You can disagree on this, but this is just my opinion. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's begin. So that is the first phrase of the first movement of the very first piano sonatas in F minor. It was composed in 1795 and it's part of the Opus 2 piano sonatas. There are 3 of them, and Beethoven dedicated them to his teacher, Joseph Haydn. Since it's his first piano sonata, it's quite simple and concise. The structure is fairly classical and conventional, although it's quite dramatic for that time. First of all, the key signature is in F minor, like I said before, which is a key with 4 flats, and that is quite an outgoing key, I should say, for a very first piano sonata. For example, Mozart's was in C major, Brahms was also in C major, but Beethoven's is in F minor. Overall, the sonata is very well made. This first movement has a very dramatic and dramatic character, while the second movement is more lyrical. It's marked Adagio as an F major, and it's marked, the expression here is dolce, which means sweet. This is the beginning of the second movement. So that's the first half of the first phrase. And the third movement is a minuet. It's marked allegretto. And the fourth movement is a very powerful prestissimo. Now this sonata overall, I would rank this on this tier list a solid A, I would say. It's very well made, but quite conventional. Now the second piano sonata is in A major, and it has quite a contrasting character of the first movement. The first movement is marked allegro vivace, and it starts piano. These staccato octaves and this running fifth motif. Now yes, and then comes something like yes. Second movement, I find the second movement quite interesting because the texture it creates. So basically, the upper voices are played tenuto chords, and then below the bass line is staccato, and this paired creates this sound. Yes. I'd say its character is quite calm, for now at least, and quite mysterious, and it's also kind of playful in a way. So, and Beethoven kind of learned how to utilize comedy in music probably through Haydn and Mozart. He was a big fan of Mozart's, and well, he was quite prominent student of Haydn's. Now the third movement is Scherzo and Allegretto, and the rondo is a grazioso, so it's not too fast, but it's moderately fast, and the pace is quite easy to follow. Now I would give the second sonata an A as well. I think it has quite similar quality to the first one. It's very a strong start, and I also really like the sound of it in general. Now the third piano sonata is virtuosic piano sonata. It's marked Allegro con brio. It's in C major. So the right hand plays thirds, and this repeats first on the tonic, and then the dominant, and then tonic, which was a very common structure used for phrases at that period. So this just sounds like this. Virtuosic. Now excuse my playing. And also one notable feature of the sonata is that it has an actual cadenza, like a piano concerto, for example. And this was quite new at the time. The third sonata, I'd say, has more of a piano concerto character more than a piano sonata character. Now the second movement is Adagio, and it is in the median key, E major, which was also quite unusual. Now, as you may see later in the Waldstein Sonata, the first subject is in C major, and then the second subject is in E major, the median. The second movement starts like this. Yes, it's a very charming and sweet little piece. And the third movement is a scherzo and allegro, and the fourth movement is an allegro assai rondo. And it starts with these parallel chords. Yes, and it goes on with scales and all that. Yes, overall the sonata is very virtuosic, and it's also quite large. And I would give the sonata a slightly higher ranking than the first two. This just, I think, really shows, it's beginning to show kind of like how Beethoven is, you know. He pushed forward the genre of piano sonatas, and not only piano sonatas, also piano concertos, symphonies. He did all sorts of things, and this third sonata is a very good demonstration of this. It is a very long sonata, a very grand one, and there's also cadenza in there, and it overall sounds more like a piano concerto than a piano sonata. So I would give this sonata somewhere between A and S. Okay, Now we move on to Opus 7. This one was dedicated to Babette von Klegewix, and it was composed between 1796 and 97. It starts off with these repeated notes, repeated E flat, which is the tonic, and piano chords on the right hand. Goes on like that. This piano sonata has a lot of contrast, and it's a contrast between piano, fortissimo, fast, soft, slow. Yes, it also has a lot of staccato notes, and overall very fast piece. This sonata's nickname is actually the Grand Sonata, which makes sense because it is not only just grand in character, it's actually the second longest Beethoven piano sonata he ever wrote, just after the Hammerklavier, which is around 45 minutes long. Now, after the first movement, there's a very nice second movement. It's marked largo con gran espressione, and it's in C major. Now the relationship between E flat major and C major is, well, kind of distant. If it was C minor, that would be the relative minor, so it wouldn't be that far, but since it's C major, which is the parallel major of C minor, it makes it quite a distant key, but not too much. It starts off with these piano chords, followed by fairly long rests. Now these rests go away, and the phrase expands. Very expressive. That's the first phrase. It also has a section where there's tenuto chords on the right hand, and there's staccato bass line in the left hand, which resembles the second movement of the second sonata. It sounds like this. Yes. Now the third movement of this sonata is an allegro scherzo, so it's not too fast, and it's marked dolce and piano. Yes, and it continues like that. And the fourth movement is a rondo. It's marked poco allegretto e grazioso, so it's not too fast, and it's supposed to be played graciously. I really like this melody. somewhere between an A and S as well. I believe that the fourth piano sonata has a higher quality than the first and second piano sonatas. Now on to Opus 10. There's 3 sonatas in Opus 10, and it's dedicated to Anna Margaret von Braun. Now the fifth piano sonata was composed between 1796 and 98. Now this is the first piano sonata so far by Beethoven to have 3 movements instead of 4. So it's a sonata of a slightly smaller scale, but it's very dramatic and it doesn't really sound that small. It's marked Allegro molto e con brio, and it's in C minor. Now the reason why people call this the little Pathetique is because it resembles the character, and also because the second movement is in the subdominant, just like in the Pathetique sonata, and also because it's in C minor. Beethoven wrote quite a lot of pieces in C minor and also his relative major E flat, and these keys were specially reserved for more grandiose works. For example, the third symphony, like the Eroica, and also the fifth symphony. Yes. Now this fifth sonata has a very powerful character. It starts like this. That's the first subject. Now this second subject is in the subdominant, but it actually modulates sort of in the middle, and the harmonies here get very interesting, especially in the second half of the phrase. Yes, these chords are not very classical at all. So this also shows that Beethoven is kind of altering his harmonic language in preparation for his middle period. Now the second movement, like I said, it's in A flat. It's marked Adagio molto, very, very slow. And as piano, I think I really like this melody because it's just listen to it. It's very intimate and it's lovely. Now the finale, the third movement, is prestissimo, so very, very fast rondo. Now, no, I'm sorry, it's not a rondo, it's in sonata form. It starts with these really fast. Yes. This part has always reminded me of the Fifth Symphony. rate this fifth sonata an A as well. I was going to give it higher, but I feel like there's gonna be too many sonatas up here because we have a B and C tier as well. I removed the D, E, and F because there's just no bad piano sonatas out there. The fifth one, I'll give it an A. Now, on to the sixth piano sonata. It's an F major and it's quite a contrasting piece. So these staccato chords open the piece along with this motive. And I think this is what gives it a comedic character. And there's a more contrasting, more flowing. Some parts of this piece is comedic, but I think actually overall it's also quite it's quite legato and it's very melodic. Now, the second movement is not a slow movement. It's an allegretto. I'd say it's somewhere between a minuet and a scherzo. Yes. Now, the third movement, this sonata also has only 3 movements. It's a presto rondo. Yes, and this acts more like a fugue subject, but instead of a fugue, we get a canon. It repeats octave up, and now we get the theme in the dominant. Yes, this movement has a very lively, very joyful character. They're also very fast. I'd rate number 6, same with 5. Now, we move to the 7th piano sonata. This one is in 4 movements and it's in D major. The first movement is in cut time and it begins with these octaves. And then we get more like third movement in the left hand and more a flowing movement. And then we get these virtuosic tremolos. Yeah, this first movement overall has a very dramatic character. We move on to the second movement, which is largo e mesto. It's in D minor and it's practically the opposite of the first movement. It's slow, it's sad, it's tragic. Let me just play for you the first 8 bars. And then moves on to a more lyrical phrase. Now, this part has always reminded me of yearning and waiting for something to happen in solitude. It's like someone has left someone and now he's waiting. And then comes a diminished seventh. Weeping. Anger. Falls back down. I really love this. I adore the second move. I'd say the second movement is the best movement out of this entire sonata, at least for me. Now we get a minuet. Yes, with a short trio without repeats. Now we get a rondo. Now this rondo theme, it starts with something that's not really a melody, it's just fragments. And then we get more of a phrase. And it's interrupted. Fragments. Deceptive cadence. And then we get an actual melody phrase. Overall, I quite like the sonata. Just for the second movement, I might give it an S. But honestly, I don't think it's quite an S, so I'd say it's between A and S. Yes. Now, the famous Pathetique Sonata number 8. It's in C minor. It has a grave introduction and an allegro, a main part. Now, it was composed in 1798 and 99 under Opus 13. Let me just play for you the introduction. First subject. Now, there's a lot of these sighing figures. All of these sighing figures. There's a brief hope here. And it modulates to E flat major. Happiness doesn't last long. and after the deceptive cadence, there's a very long rest, and it almost seems like we're lost and we can't find a way back. Now what do? You repeat the motif. Solitaire. This allegro section, the second theme is traditionally, normally in the subdominant or the dominant, but this time the second theme is actually presented it's presented in E flat minor, which is the parallel minor of E flat, which is the relative major of C minor. But it's still very distant. But this E flat minor soon turns into E flat major, and we get this sort of triumph. And then also there's another interesting thing here, because the second theme repeats in the recapitulation in F minor. Traditionally I'd be repeated in the tonic, but no, Beethoven refuses to abide to the rules because he's Beethoven. Now we get this beautiful second movement, Adagio cantabile. Can you just play the opening melody? Excuse me. Yeah, I just really like this theme and the second movement in general, and we get this very dramatic third movement, Rondo Allegro. It opens with this theme. The first theme of the rondo closes in a very distinguished manner. Now, overall, I would give the Pathetique Sonata between A and S again, because it's just so well made. But personally, I'm starting to get a little bit sick of it now. But not too much, because I still really like this sonata. Now we get Opus 14. There's two sonatas in Opus 14. They're composed between 1798 and 99. The first movement of the ninth sonata is allegro, and it begins with this theme. E major, a very joyful key. This sonata is very small and humble in character compared to the Pathetique. The Pathetique is very wild. This one is very courtly. Well, we do get some fun in the third movement, Rondo. The theme begins like this. Rapid scales. Sounds very joyful in general. Now, overall I give the ninth sonata a little less than Pathetique, but still an A. As you can see, B and C are still empty. Now we get the 10th sonata, which is number 2 of Opus 14. It's in G major, and it starts with a very lyrical first theme. Yes. It's very classical. It's very conservative, I think. The second movement is a set of variations based on this theme. Now, I think it's the piano and this occasional sudden sforzandi that give this sort of joyful and light-hearted comedic character. It's kind of outdone in the coda, where there are these staccato piano This is kind of like a surprise you might find in Haydn's 94th Symphony. Now the scherzo is very light-hearted as well. Overall, this sonata is very light-hearted, very classical, very sweet, very nice. Yeah, a lot of staccato. The 10th sonata, it sounds really nice to my ear, but there's nothing monumental about it. But I don't really care about monumental music, so I'll give it a solid A. Now, we get the 11th sonata in B flat major, allegro con brio. The first movement is very virtuosic. It begins like this. This motif is balanced out with the lyrical theme. Yes. Overall, this sonata is very virtuosic. There's a lot of arpeggios, like here. Yes. second movement is marked Adagio con molta espressione. It starts off pianissimo, it's in 9/8 time, and it's in E flat major. It begins like this. This dissonance is fascinating. Yeah, this dissonance is very radical. And the third movement is a very light-hearted minuet. And the fourth movement is a rondo allegretto, not too fast, not too slow. This melody is very lyrical and very flowy, legato. Yes. I think it kind of resembles the theme of the rondo in the fourth piano sonata, maybe not so much, but that's just my opinion. It just reminded me of it. Maybe because of these arpeggios here. 30-second those arpeggios. Now the 11th sonata, I like it, but not as much as, say, the 10th sonata, just better. I would give it maybe between A and a B. Yes. Move on to the 12th sonata. And this is a sonata I really enjoy playing and listening. The first movement is not sonata form. It's new in Beethoven's piano sonatas, at least. It's the first time that Beethoven opens a piano sonata with a movement that's not in sonata form. The first theme, let me just play to you the theme. Isn't that theme very nice? The variations are very nice too. For example, the first variation. Or let's say the fifth variation. Yes. Now the second movement is a fairly short, concise scherzo in allegro molto. It's been a long time since I played this scherzo. Now we get this Marcia Funebre, the funeral march. This is where the nickname of the sonata comes from. The nickname of the 12th sonata is Funeral March. It's in A flat minor, which is the most flats a key signature can have, 7. It has this very marching quality to it, of course, because it's a march. I wouldn't say it's charming because it's tragic, but it's still very beautiful. And contrasting to this deep tragic loss, we get the fourth movement, which is an allegro rondo. Yes. Overall, I give this sonata, well, a S. First S, because it just connects with me, this sonata. I especially like the first movement, the variations and the theme is just so sublime, beautiful. Now we get opus 27. The first one is not very well known, the second one very well known. They're both known as Sonata, Quasi, and Fantasia, and they were composed between 1800 and 1801. It was dedicated to Josephine von Liechtenstein. The first movement of the 13th sonata begins like this. So what this essentially is a rondo combined with theme and variations. So this is the rondo theme, what I just played, and this is variated upon every return of the rondo theme. Now, all four movements of the sonata are connected, so they're not separated by empty space. Rather, they're just interwoven into each other. So for example, when the first movement ends, that's the end of the first movement, and then it goes straight to the second movement. This sonata, the reason it's called Quasi una Fantasia is because it's supposed to play like a fantasia. And I think it's designed very much like a fantasia. Instead of the movement being separated, they're actually very connected. And what a fantasia is basically is a series of sections of contrasting character combined to form a single piece that is played continuously, and it's often also in an improvisationary style. I would give number 13 a B. Yes. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't really like the theme of the first movement. It's just too simple for me. Now, let's move on to the infamous number 14, commonly known as the Mondschein or Moonlight. This is plain wrong because Beethoven didn't name it Moonlight. It's Sonata, Quasi, una Fantasia. That's the name that Beethoven has given it, and that is how it should be played according to. The first movement is Adagio sostenuto, and it begins with these arpeggios, these accompaniatory adagios, arpeggios. And then the theme, the melody. Goes on like this. This rhythm keeps on going, never stopping, because it's sort of like a prelude actually. Well, it's a sonata quasi una fantasia means it should be improvisatory. And common things improvisationers would do would take these few motifs and then expand upon them, and that is exactly what Beethoven has done. What's unusual about this sonata is that it starts with a slow movement. This is the first time, as far as I know, if anyone has ever begun a piano sonata with a slow movement. But Beethoven has done it, and it's really popular now. Yes. It's followed by the second movement, which is in the parallel major, and it's more easily notated as D flat major, because if it would be C sharp major, it would be 7 sharps, which is hard to read. It's allegretto, it's very light-hearted, except very crazy syncopations. The syncopation. Yes, it almost doesn't sound like a minuet, but it is a minuet. Yeah. Now the infamous virtuosic third movement. It's not as difficult as many people might presume, but it's still very difficult, so yeah. I say I give Moonlight a solid A. There's a reason why it became so popular. No, I'm not gonna diss it for being overrated or anything. Even though it is, but well, it is a very nice piece of music, and I can't deny that. Now we get number 15, Pastorale, opus 28. It's in D major, and it starts with these repeated notes in the bass, which kind of sounds like timpani. Now, this reminds me of the timpani beginning of the violin concerto by Beethoven, also in D major. Now, the allegro first movement, it begins with 3 hits from the timpani, and then there's this melody in the right hand. I'd say the pedal point on the tonic gives it a very traditional and pastoral feeling, which makes sense because the nickname is Pastorale. Now, the second movement is Andantes, and it's D minor. This also has a legato right hand, and the staccato left hand, which resembles the second movement of the second sonata. The first phrase is and the third movement, it's a very light-hearted and funny scherzo. What makes this funny is the simplicity of it, and just simplicity, and also the character of the motifs themselves, and the sudden changes of dynamics. It starts like this. And this is this exact same thing is repeated once more, and it's harmonized. This is what I'm talking about. It's dramatic, but it's funny. It's dramatic because it's forte, southern forte, and then it's piano. Southern forte. Very cheerful. Now, the fourth movement, the rondo, has a very pastoral feeling because it has a tonic pedal point for 16 bars, which is a very long time. Let me just play you the first thing. Throughout the whole first rondo theme, the tonic pedal point is all held. Yes. Overall, I think this piece has a very charming simplicity to it. The pedal points and the simple arpeggios, and it's, yeah. And there's also a limited amount of motifs, which creates a very connected feeling. Now, to rate this sonata, I would put the Pastorale between A and S. It's a very nice sonata. On to the 16th. The first movement is Allegro vivace, G major. Now, number 16, 17, and 18 are all under the same opus 31, and they were composed in the early 1800s. Now, this is the beginning of Beethoven's middle period. Or maybe you can argue that the middle period actually starts from the 13th piano sonata, but this is how it starts. Yeah, that's the beginning of the first movement. So first, a noteworthy trait is that the right hand comes the 16th note earlier than the left hand, creating this weird but interesting effect. Now, when I first heard this, I thought it was weird, but now I really like it. I don't know why. I guess tastes change. Now the third movement is what I like, the rondo, allegretto. This theme just clicks with me. I really like this theme. I really like the sound of it and how it's varied later on, and how it's incorporated into different other themes as well. Now the coda section has a lot of tempo changes. So when the coda is about to begin, this kind of feels like setting up for cadenza actually. So from here. Reaching for D, fermata. Now this is the beginning of the mini cadenza. Fragment. Adagio, tempo 1, descendant cadence, Adagio, now this Adagio leads to a trill, and it turns into presto. Now this dissonance is really extraordinary and probably never heard of before Beethoven. This dissonance is very jarring, but it sets up and is very dramatic for this outburst. Comedic, but it's done like this and it's very nice. Now, the 16th sonata, I would put it somewhere between A and S. I like the rondo. I like the rondo the most, but I also like the first movement, but I like the rondo more. Now, the Tempest sonata. The 17th, D minor. It has 3 tempo changes in the first phrase. Largo, allegro, adagio, and then back to largo. And then that all leads to the first theme. Yes. Now, the second movement is an adagio in B flat major. It starts with this chord. I really like this harmony here. Very charming, very nice. Now the allegretto, the third movement, which is also the last movement, it makes use of a few motivic elements to create a very nice movement. Now, I think I'll give the Tempest. I think I'll put it between A and S. Yeah, it deserves one treatment. Now, on to the Hunt the 18th sonata in E flat major. E flat major occurs a lot in Beethoven, along with C minor. They are his most common and favorite keys. The allegro starts very ambiguous. The harmony is ambiguous. We don't know what key we are in. Only here do we get the first taste of E flat. This harmonic language was never heard of. This is Beethoven being unique and being himself, and I respect him for that. The second movement. This sonata actually doesn't have any slow movements. That's interesting. The scherzo second movement, allegretto vivace. Southern forte. This is kind of comedic. I think this sounds like a bassoon, actually, a bassoon staccato. So it sounds very comedic because bassoons are always associated with funny things in the Woodman family. After the scherzo, we have a minuet. It's not a slow movement, but it kind of acts in the place of a slow movement. It's very moderately paced, and the melody, I really like this melody. We get presto con fuoco finale, and this is a sonata form. I think this motion really sounds like a horse galloping really fast, and you'll hear why. Very exciting. The hunt. Very exciting. I actually like it more than the Tempest. But it's not quite S, is it? Or maybe it is. I don't know. I really like the Sonata. Okay, I think it's worthy of S. But 18 in S. Now follows 2 Leichte Sonate, and which is actually composed in 1795 and 1798. But it's numbered Opus 49. The reason for that being, when Beethoven composed these 2 sonatas as Hausmusik, which is music designed for amateur players, so it's technically and structurally easier to follow and interpret. But Beethoven thought of this as unworthy of publishment, and I have no idea why. I really like the sonatas. He hid them in a shelf somewhere until his little brother found it, and then his little brother thought it was worthy, and he published it. And thanks to him, we now have these small little pieces perfect for students, And that is exactly what they're being used for, especially for the second one of the set. It is probably very common in piano teaching. Now the first one, number 19, is in G minor. It's a tempo of andante. I just play the exposition. That's the exposition. Very short and concise, very pretty and simple. The second movement is a light-hearted rondo in G major and 6/8 time. We have Sonata. It's in cut time, G major, allegro ma non troppo. You must have heard the sonata, or maybe even played it. Very sweet, very nice, perfect for children. The second movement though is rarely played, only the first movement is. But I think the second movement should be played more. Tempo di minuetto, it's very simple but sweet. They might say it's a minuetto, but actually only the tempo is a minuetto. It's actually rondo form. Yeah. Not much to say about the easy sonatas because they're so short. I think they're both ranked the same. Yeah, and despite them being really easy, they're really charming and nice to listen to, aren't they? Even for professionals. But I don't think they're worthy of the S tier just yet. So I'm just gonna put them between B and A. There's nothing really special about them, but I mean it suits their purpose. I'll put 19 and 20 between B and A. Now we move on to the big sonatas. Now this is really the height of Beethoven's dramaticism. This is stereotypical Beethoven. This is the time when he wrote Eroica. And then also a few years after, only like 2 years after actually. Now this Waldstein Sonata is in C major, allegro con brio, starts with pianissimo. Now this sonata uses a lot of pianissimo and piano, with occasional outbursts forte. Now it starts with these repeated notes, and that expands into kind of like a melody, but not really, it's just a mixture of motives. These motives. So up until the fermata it sounds like starts off very quiet and very light actually, except for the part where it gets really loud. And then it gets really loud during the exposition and during the development section. And the second movement, the second movement acts not as a separate movement, but more like an introduction to the third movement. Adagio molto. Now, this is not the original second movement of the Waldstein Sonata. Beethoven originally intended a much longer, more complicated second movement, now known as the Andante Favori, but it was actually published at a different opus, and this new second movement was created because he was advised by his publishers to do so, because it didn't really fit the sonata. And Beethoven seemed to know that too, so he changed it. It starts off like this. That's the first phrase, very sweet, very nice. The second movement at the end, it ends with a fermato on G. And that leads to the third movement. It's a very beautiful melody, theme. Although it gets very difficult and it ends very ferociously and very triumphantly, typical of Beethoven. Now, before the Appasionata, which is 23, we have Opus 54, number 22. In tempo di minuetto, it was composed in 1804. This sonata is way more different. First of all, it doesn't have a sonata form movement at all. It's only in two movements, and it's much more lighter in character compared to the two sonatas that encase it, 21 and 23. 22 starts like this. That's the theme. Very nice. It also has this other contrasting theme. The second movement is very lyrical, and it's a perpetual motion, meaning the 16 notes never stop. excuse me, I'm sight reading this. Let's move on to 23. Oh, before that, let's rank it. Waldstein, it's very large, very impressive. Not quite S tier for me, but slightly above A, so between A and S. And 22, I put it in A. Okay, now 23. Appasionata, the famous Appasionata, it was composed in 1804 and 1805. Opus 57. It's an F minor, and it starts like this. Sounds familiar. Yes. It's that motive. It is 11 opuses away from that symphony. So I mean, maybe Beethoven saw some connection. No. The second movement, for me personally, the harmony kind of sounds like modern music. At least the first time I heard it, I really thought it sounded like modern music. You may disagree. By modern music, I do not mean Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber. I mean more kind of like maybe New Age or something. No, not New Age. Yeah, but it sounds more like 20th century, late 20th century almost. Yeah. Now we have the Allegro ma non troppo, the rondo, and it starts like this. These dissonant chords actually are continuing from the second movement. The Appasionata connects the second movements and the third movements, just like in the Waldstein, very similar. The rondo, it's in sonata form, the third movement, not a rondo, sorry. And an unusual thing about this exposition is that it doesn't repeat. However, the recapitulation repeats. So that's very interesting. And also, I really like the coda of the Appasionata. The presto coda. It's probably my favorite part in the entire third movement. Yeah. The Appasionata I'd rank definitely at least an A. But now that I think of it, I don't think it can go any higher because I don't know. The Appasionata is regarded as one of the greatest compositions by Beethoven ever, but I think that it just doesn't really connect with me. I put it an A because I can see the quality, but it just doesn't really affect me too much. But the next one, Opus 78, number 24, does affect me. It was composed in 1809, and it's actually a huge jump from the Appasionata. It's Opus 57 to Opus 78. That's 21 opuses after. During that time, Beethoven was composing symphonies and other things. Now this sonata is very unusual key. F sharp major, which is very hard to read. It has a 4-bar adagio cantabile introduction. The first touch. Charming, actually. This was actually dedicated to Therese from Brunswick, who is one of the main candidates for who Elise was in Furley's, you know? It might have been Therese. And this was also composed for her. And it sounds very lyrical and very romantic, so I don't know. Maybe Beethoven's love of his life is Therese. But the second movement is Allegro vivace. It's very lively and doesn't sound really romantic, but it's fun for sure, and it sounds really nice. 24 I will rank as S, only because I really like the first movement. Like, some people might try to contradict my answers, but it's just my personal opinion. It might be wrong, but now we have a much smaller sonata, opus 79. It's right after 24. Pastorale tedesca, it's in G major, 3/4 time. It was composed in 1809 as well. The beginning sounds like this. Yes. I think that the melody is attractive and memorable, but I think the development section is a bit uncreative and very repetitive. Also, the recapitulation, I think, is very, I think the whole movement in general is kind of repetitive, and it's not really interesting for me, honestly. The second movement too, it has sort of, for some reason, this reminds me of some American folk song. I forgot the name of it. Well, it's very simple. The third movement is vivace. Now this chord progression reoccurs in the 30th sonata, which we will look at later. To rank the sonata, I think I'll have to put it I'll put it at a C. This is the only Beethoven piano sonata that I'll ever put in a C. But I really don't really like the sonata. I don't know, I don't really like it because, first of all, it's very simple, and the first movement is quite repetitive, and the development section as well is a bit uncreative, so. But some people might try to differ. But me personally, I think the first movement could have been done a bit better. Okay, but the 26th, it was dedicated to the Archduke Rudolph, who was Beethoven's greatest patron, supporter, friend, and piano student. He was actually forced to leave Vienna for his own safety. So Beethoven composed this as a sort of programmatory work for his departure, his absence, and his arrival. It's Opus 81A. Now, since it's a program sonata, each movement has its own title. In this case, it's Leichte in French, or better for me at least, that's Lebewohl. Lebewohl is farewell. And as you can see here in the actually you can't see. In the introduction, these three notes, Beethoven writes Lebewohl. So it's kind of like saying farewell at the beginning. Let me just play the introduction. Listen to the Allegro Sonata form. The second movement is titled The Absence. And around this time, German nationalism was kind of emerging in German states back then. As a result, Beethoven and other artists too began to utilize values of German nationalism. For example, Beethoven, during his late period especially, he started using not only Italian tempo marks, which is custom, but instead he used German tempo markings and expression markings. In this case, Abwesenheit, which means the absence. There's an Italian tempo marking andante espressivo, which is expressive walking tempo. And in German, below he writes in gehende Bewegung, doch mit viel Ausdruck, which means to play it in like moto, in motion, and with a lot of expression. So motion and expression. It begins very sort of uneasily, and the harmony is very, very big. It's very clear Beethoven felt very lonely while his friend was gone. But then, that chord opens up the third movement, das Wiedersehen, which means to see each other again, the reunion. Vivacisamente, very vivace, and below he writes im lebhaftesten Seifenmasse, which basically means in the most lively tempo. Yes, it's very fast, very virtuosic, and very playful. Overall, I think I really like the story behind this sonata. And I also like the sound, even if it wasn't a program music, it's still an excellent piece of music. So I put it in S tier. Now, let's go on to the 27th sonata. Now, Beethoven is officially in his late years. Late compositional style, meaning more innovations and creativity. The 27th sonata was composed in 1814. It's under Opus 90. It starts like this. Oh, and all the tempo markings on this sonata is purely German. The first tempo marking is mit Lebhaftigkeit und durchaus mit Empfindung und Ausdruck, which means to play it with liveliness and to play it through with expression and emotion. It's in E minor and it begins like this. That's the first subject. The structure itself isn't that complex. The structure is quite actually conventional. But I forgot where it was. Really odd and interesting harmony. Oh yeah, here. In the recapitulation and also in the exposition, Beethoven uses these harmonies. Here. This. The tone cluster. These are very new harmonies. And he uses them as if they're nothing. The second movement, nicht so geschwind und sehr singbar vorgetragen, is tempo marking, which means not too slow and to play it very as if you're singing, cantabile. The rondo theme is very charming and it's really beautiful. Let me just play it to you. That's the rondo theme. And the rondo theme repeats for 5 times. It appears 5 times, unaltered. It's very repetitive. And while some people may think it's too repetitive, I thought so too. Now I think it's not so big of a problem. It's, first of all, it's such a nice melody, I could hear it all day. And also, every time there's an episode or a new theme in the rondo, when the original theme comes back, it sounds slightly different. The notes haven't changed or anything, but depending on the context, the meaning of the changes. I would rank the 27th sonata between A and S. Okay, now the 28th sonata, It has German tempo markers, but also Italian tempo markers at the bottom. Opus 101. It was composed in 1816. Etwas lebhaft und mit der innigsten Empfindung, which means to play it very lively and with the greatest, deepest expression. And there's also Italian marking, allegretto ma non troppo. The exposition is very short, it's 1 page. The exposition ends floating. The second movement, lebhaft marschmäßig, vivace alla marcia. It's basically to play it as if it's a march and very lively. And then there's the third movement, langsam und sehnsuchtvoll, adagio ma non troppo con affetto, which means to play it slowly and as if kind of longing, played with longing. And then there comes the first theme of the first movement back. And then the tempo changes a bit, and then there's suddenly a fugue. This is where Beethoven's piano sonata structures get interesting, because now Beethoven is utilizing fugues and counterpoint, a lot of it, in his late piano sonatas. Actually, the last 5 piano sonatas all have fugal aspects in them. And this is where Beethoven starts innovate structure. He brings back certain material from previous movements and back to other movements to make those links. And yeah, it's something Beethoven really did specially. And then comes the most difficult and longest piano sonata by Beethoven. It's the Hammerklavier Sonata, and when it was written, it was the most difficult piece ever written for piano at that time. Number 29, opus 106. It has a tempo marking of 138 beats per half note, which is completely horrifying because it's impossible to play. Not even the greatest pianists have ever managed to play at this tempo. Yes, it starts with very stately fortissimo chords. You need big hands for this, thankfully I do. Yeah, let me just try to play a part of it. Oh yeah, and it was composed 1817, of course, dedicated to the Archduke Rudolph. Beethoven has dedicated a lot of works to this man. very difficult. And this is not even, this is half tempo. So, yeah. This first movement is very monumental and very large. The first movement, actually, the development section is a fugue based on this motif. Now, after this movement ends, comes a second movement, scherzo, assai vivace. Let me play it in a slower tempo. Yes, it's a scherzo. Very light-hearted. There's this crazy little, very dramatic scale. Yeah, this scale, and it reaches from the lowest F to the highest F. This is actually the maximum range of the piano of this time. So he was using the entire keyboard for this scale. Crazy man he was, always pushing the limits. Now what I like about the end of this scherzo is I always like to imagine a battle between B flat and B natural. For example, B flat, B natural. B natural. Yes. Eventually, of course, B flat wins because that's a tonic. Now, the third movement of this Hammerklavier Sonata is the longest piano sonata movement ever written by Beethoven. It lasts around 20 minutes, but it's very beautiful, so I could probably listen to this for hours. The first theme. And it goes on. As you can see, it's very tragic. Several variations on this theme. Goes on, goes on. The fourth movement is so odd and so new in terms of structure. First, there's a largo introduction. Yes, this is very unheard of in this time. This is very much like modern music. More like maybe early 20th century or early mid 20th century maybe. Yes. And there's frequent tempo changes until it all breaks down into a fugue on an incredibly complicated and long fugue subject. And it looks like a nightmare to play. I've never tried it, but I've heard it before. sounds very nice for sure. It's very interesting. It's a very well-made fugue as well. The Hammerklavier Sonata, I would definitely, without question, I would rank it the S because of its all its features and how large it is, the grandiosity of the piece, and the complexity, the quality of the motives. Yes. The next sonata now, the last 3 Beethoven piano sonatas, they're my favorites. Just because how philosophical and meaningful they can be. The 30th piano sonata, like I mentioned earlier, it follows the same chord progression as the 3rd movement of the 25th sonata. Vivace ma non troppo. Now this exposition is very interesting. First of all, it lasts only 1 measure, and the first subject is incredibly short, only 8 measures. And the second subject is even shorter, it's only 7 measures. So the entirety of the exposition is only 15 measures, which is unheard of. That's the end of the exposition, it's very short. The development section is entirely based on the first subject, and it's also very short until it comes back to the recapitulation in a sort of triumphant way. Second movement connects right with the first movement. After the chord ends, the first movement. Yes, it's scherzo, prestissimo, very fast, very exciting. Now, this is my favorite movement of the sonata. It's a set of theme and variations which Andras Schiff has mentioned that it kind of resembles the Goldberg variation. In the Goldberg variations, the aria surrounds 30 variations, meaning the aria is played at the beginning and played at the end, identically, but without repeats. This is what happens here, only there's only 6 variations, I think. Yes, 6 variations. Yes. Let me just play the theme. The tempo marking is Gesamtform mit in extempendum, which means cantabile with a lot of expression. all these variations are also very nice. To rank number 30, I would no doubt certainly put it in S tier. Actually, the final sonatas are all S tier. Now, the 31st sonata is personally my favorite piano sonata by Beethoven. It's composed in 1821. There's no dedication of any sort. Opus 110, moderato cantabile molto espressivo. Very moderately singing and expressive, very expressive. This is how it begins. It's very lyrical. Yes. That's all I can play from memory. Yeah. This exposition is lovely, the themes are lovely. I just like everything about this sonata. The allegro molto in the second movement. I like that. And I also love the sound of the trio section, although I hate playing it because it's completely crazy. Now we move on to the third movement. Now here, the tempo changes 3 times in one bar. Yes, 3 times in one bar. That's actually crazy. Let me just play the introduction. It's very interesting. Double dotted rhythm. Freely. Adagio, freely. Then adagio. Adagio. Comes a very tragic aria. tragedy dies down. And from the ashes rises the phoenix. This is a lovely movement, and the fugue, yes, it's magnificent. The fugue eventually comes to a very loud. From the peak, it dies down. And it comes back to the arioso. Now this time the aria is actually much more tragic. He instructs us to use a voice that sounds as if you're dying. Perdendo le forze dolente. It's as if you're very, very sick and you can't breathe, you can hardly breathe, you can hardly sing. And there you are, singing this aria. Yes, and the rest of the aria and the motif from before, it becomes shorter, as if it's almost dead. Until major things happen. Sounds like church bells. How many? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 10 o'clock. The fugue returns, but inverted. To look at. Yeah, the 31st sonata is just a whole nother level. S. I just really like everything about the 31st sonata. It's just spiritually just perfect. It's just the counterpoint, the tragedy, contrast, emotions, lyricism, melodies, all of these are so masterfully written. Now the last piano sonata, Maestoso, is the tempo, Opus 111, and it is dedicated to Archduke Rudolph. Again, it was composed in 1821 and 1822, 5 years before his death. It's in C minor, and it begins with an introduction with this diminished seventh leap and a short arpeggio. That's the first thing. It almost acts like a fugue subject, which it technically is, because the exposition carries out very much like a fugue, or fugato, should I say. Yeah, again, the counterpoint is very prominent in Beethoven's late works. The first movement in general, very dramatic, very fast, and it ends in C major. In preparation for what is about to come. This is the last Beethoven piano sonata movement. That's the first theme of the set of variations. It's an arietta, adagio molto semplice, cantabile. It has around 4 or 5 variations. Yes. The first variations are getting faster, but the later variations are more. For example, this one variation is almost minimalistic. From the 1900s. Yes. And the very last one. The very last variation has a lot of trills, and this is how it ends. That is Beethoven's farewell to the piano sonata genre. One last thing, we have to rate the sonata. There's no question about it. S. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe.